want to share with you how to possibly overcome it if you have it, but also how to prevent it. And if it is an epidemic, which it is, it means that any of us are at risk for it, right? So all of us want to find a way to prevent it. So if we were to go and open up our dictionary and figure out what the actual definition of diabetes is, it is simply having blood sugar levels so high for so long that they can eventually cause significant health complications if not corrected. So, having blood sugars so high for so long. So if you were to eat a piece of cake, will that raise your sugars? Yes. But the key is you want it to come back to normal, right? You don't want it to stay up there. So we will work through this and show how to have this healthy glucose level. Blood glucose testing in diagnosing diabetes, this is the way you would have it diagnosed, is simply by going to your doctor and getting a lab requisition and having your blood tested. It would be a fasting test, and these are the glucose levels. You would want to be normal is between 3.9 and 5.5 in Canadian values here. Pre-diabetes, or impaired glucose tolerance, so pre-diabetic state, is the 5.6 to 7. So if you're within that range, the doctor may say to you, you know what, your sugars are a little bit high, watch your diet. But once you start to go over the 7 millimoles per liter, now you are into the diagnosis of actual diabetes. Okay? Here are some facts specifically for Canada. The average person has diabetes for 7 years before being diagnosed. And there are many others who are not actually diagnosed and walking around with it for more years than that. If you're not somebody to routinely go and see your doctor and have your blood work done, you may be walking around with it and not realizing it. 20% of diabetes cases remain undiagnosed. Every 3 minutes, another Canadian is diagnosed with diabetes. That's definitely an epidemic, isn't it? Every 3 minutes. While the prevalence increases with age, more than 50% of Canadians diagnosed with diabetes are of working age between the ages 25 and 64 years of age. And I'll explain to you in the next couple slides here why that is interesting for that age group. 3.4 million Canadians are living with diabetes today. By the year 2025, the number is expected to reflect 5 million. Diabetes, we know, is costing the country billions of dollars, and at least 1 in 10 deaths are attributed to diabetes in Canada. So otherwise, 1 in every 4 Canadians has diabetes or pre-diabetes. So let's work through what happens with a diabetic person, and let's begin with a healthy person. What is normal? How should it work? First of all, you're going to sit down, you're going to consume a meal. Okay, and that digestion begins, your nutrients break down and begin to be absorbed. One of the most important nutrients is glucose. So a lot of times we hear the word glucose and we think, oh, that's bad for you. But we actually need glucose, right? Glucose is a simple sugar critical for survival. It is the primary source of energy. Okay, so that's all normal. And the glucose enters the bloodstream from your digestive tract. So as the nutrients are being broken down and absorbed, the glucose enters the bloodstream and from the digestive tract, circulating, causing your blood sugar, your glucose, to rise. The glucose now is in the bloodstream, and it needs to enter your cells in order to give them the energy. Remember, your glucose is the primary source of energy, so it's got to get into those cells to provide that energy. But your cells are locked. So think of a jail cell. Okay, and the door is locked. The circulating glucose cannot cross through a cell membrane by itself. It needs a key to unlock that door and get into the cell. And what is that key? The key is in the form of insulin, which is a hormone secreted by our pancreas. Okay? The insulin then travels to the cells, connects to that insulin receptor on the outside of the cell membrane. The door is unlocked. And then it's able to get into the cell, that glucose can get into the cell. Now, as the glucose enters into the cell, the blood sugar levels naturally decreased, right? Because it's coming out of blood into the cells specifically. It's now being used for energy. 4 to 5 hours later, your blood sugar level should be nice and level once again. And, however, if you leave it too long, it begins to drop too low, and that is where we suddenly are needing more food because we're feeling weak and tired again. And again, we need that glucose for energy to get us going once again. And so it repeats itself. Does that make sense? Sounds pretty simple, right? Okay, now, there's two types of diabetes. There's a type 1 and a type 2. And so let's go through the type 1 diabetes first. Type 1 diabetes is known as childhood diabetes or juvenile diabetes, okay? So small children usually. This means the pancreas, remember, is where the insulin is produced, right? So the pancreas is actually damaged and it won't produce the amount of insulin that is required. So here you are, you sit down, you consume that meal, right? The food is broken down into your nutrients, including the glucose, comes from the digestive tract into the bloodstream. The blood sugar levels raise, and the glucose now looks for the cells, right? But the door is locked. So they're waiting for the insulin to come and unlock the door, latch onto them, unlock the door so that they can go inside. That's what a healthy person's pancreas would do. But without insulin, all of a sudden there's a backup. All this glucose is starting to get backed up, waiting to get into the cells, but there's nothing there to unlock the doors. And so this glucose raises and your blood sugars raise, and this can become dangerous to the body. So because your pancreas is not producing the insulin, then what do we have to do? We have to, some way, get insulin into our body to be able to allow that glucose to enter the cells. And so this is where we end up with, in juvenile diabetes or childhood diabetes, we have to do insulin injections or shots. And that is the purpose of it. So if somebody thinks, you know what, this isn't healthy, they shouldn't be taking this medication, they should find other ways to not inject themselves with the insulin, that person will die. Okay, so type 1 diabetes, we cannot change that. We cannot reverse that. We cannot find other means for them, natural herbal remedies. They have to have insulin injections, okay? And they are not a bad person for doing that. So anyone with type 1 diabetes has to do that. That's just the way it is. Their pancreas is not functioning and they have no choice. And if not, yes, they will be dead with complications within days or even hours. Controlling blood sugars decrease the risk for serious chronic complications associated with diabetes. So these complications go with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, where it is heart disease, high blood pressure, kidney failure, severe nerve damage, and blindness. Okay, so type 1 we can't do anything for at this point to reverse it. It's childhood, usually in ages 5 and under. You know, it can give or take. It can be babies and toddlers. Okay, let's move on. Let's go into type 2 diabetes, and then we'll cover a little more, bring it all together after here. So type 2 diabetes is a little bit similar, but yet different, okay? So you sit down, you consume your meal. Again, digestion occurs, nutrients absorbed, including the glucose, enters the bloodstream, right? In response now, it needs that key to open up, so the pancreas attempts to secrete enough insulin. Now, at this point of type 2 diabetes, it means that the sugars have been high for quite some time. And as mentioned, a lot of people are walking around with diabetes for 7 years before they're even diagnosed. So the blood is constantly being flooded with this glucose and trying to get insulin. And so your pancreas has been overworked and being forced to produce enormous amounts of insulin in an attempt to stabilize those blood sugar levels. So unlike type 1 diabetes, where there's not enough insulin being produced because it just can't produce it, type 2 instead ends up with extra insulin was being produced, but your sugar levels are still too high. So it's like the glucose isn't getting into the cells, so your pancreas is assuming that they haven't put out enough, it hasn't put out enough insulin, because why isn't those doors being unlocked, right? So your cells become what is called resistant to insulin. They're not connecting with the insulin to be able to open that door. The receptors are no longer eager to allow the insulin to unlock the cells and allow the glucose to enter. Therefore, it takes increasing amounts of insulin to now control the blood sugar, causing your pancreas to keep working harder and harder. And after years of producing too much insulin, the pancreas burns out and is no longer able to keep up with producing the amount that is needed to get that glucose into the cells. So to rectify the problem now, we have to do something, right? We have to get insulin in there, and so we begin on usually pill form, and eventually it'll increase to the point we have to end up with insulin injections, right? So to rectify the problem, this is what happens. The injections, the oral medications are used to force the glucose into the cells. In itself, this is not a good long-term solution. So we're not taking care of the problem. We're just injecting the insulin to force it all in now. Okay? So before we go on, let's just sort of compare the two between type 1 and type 2. Type 1 diabetes occurs in only 5 to 10% of the population. So that's good news, right? Because type 1 cannot be reversed. I haven't said anything about type 2. The good news about type 2 is it represents 90% of the population, but it is reversible. And so that's the really good news, right? So diabetes develops when glucose cannot enter the body cells to use as fuel. That's the same for both, right? And this happens because of one or two reasons. Type 1, again, there is no key, no insulin to unlock the door to the cells. That's type 1, you have to give it insulin. Type 2 is the insulin that is being produced is not able to still unlock the door properly, or the lock itself does not work, which is the insulin. And so that's our type 2 diabetes. Is that clear? All right, good. Okay, we also have the pre-diabetes. So remember that middle stage leading up to the 7 millimoles per liter, the 5.6 to 7. This is an early form of diabetes. This is your warning signs. This is your body saying, beware, sugars are up, you got to do something before things start to get damaged. And so they're higher than normal, but not quite to a point we're going to diagnose you with diabetes and put you on insulin yet. So this is kind of your what shall I say, second chance to kind of get it together really fast before you end up on medication. And this is the interesting part. Most people don't realize that in this pre-diabetic stage, it is a strong indicator of progressive heart disease. So not only are we setting ourselves up for diabetes, but we're setting ourselves up for heart failure. All right, gestational diabetes. This is when women are pregnant. They may end up being diagnosed with this type of diabetes. Many times this happens when sugar levels are high before the lady even becomes pregnant. She is at much higher risk for the gestational diabetes. So she might already be in that pre-diabetic mode. But it can happen just during the pregnancy as well. It threatens the health of the mother, yes, but also the baby especially. The baby has a risk of developing diabetes in its future as it grows up. So when we talk about things being hereditary or in the genes, this could be a situation where if the mother has the gestational diabetes, she's setting up her child for the risk of the type 1 or childhood diabetes, right? So that can be very genetic. Or in the genes. Type 2 diabetes, on the other hand, is different, and we'll explain that as we go. Okay, so the good news again, diabetes is preventable. Type 2 diabetes. Now, what I'm going to share with you tonight will help to prevent, but also to reverse type 2 diabetes. But if you have type 1 diabetes, this same diet and lifestyle will actually help you to control your type 1 diabetes so that it doesn't progress. So even though we can't reverse it, we certainly want to stabilize it, right? So we all fit into the same basket in this case this evening. So at least 90% is type 2 cases. Type 2 accounts for overwhelming majority of cases caused by lifestyle and environment. So we don't always have control of the environment, which is unfortunate. But the biggest thing is diet and lifestyle. And so the best way to say goodbye to diabetes is to never say hello, right? The right education and proper preventative choices, diabetes can be stopped before it even starts. So it is reversible, there is hope. The same habits that take a healthy person into the majority of type 2 diabetics to reverse the disease and avoid its complications can help the type 1 improve their health or stabilize it. Okay, so in saying this as well, when I mentioned type 1 diabetes, it's for childhood, right? Or very young, 5 and under sort of idea, diabetes. That has followed still that same pattern. Type 2 diabetes was always known as adult onset diabetes. This is where we would get it in our later years when the pancreas wasn't working at its optimal state, right? So in our senior years, maybe 60, 70, 80, all of a sudden we start to have a little bit of a sugar problem, and sometimes we would end up into that type 2 diabetic mode. So adult onset, late stage adult onset diabetes. The interesting thing is now type 2 diabetes is being diagnosed in any age, and even children under even the age 5, 4, 5 years old are being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So there's a problem, isn't there? And so it's no longer that we're wearing it, we're having other issues that are happening beforehand. Okay, so let's say you go to the doctor and you're diagnosed with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, okay? And so what are they going to tell you? Well, this is probably my greatest pet peeve is when you are diagnosed with diabetes, they will tell you, okay, unfortunately, you got the short straw. You got the short stick. This is the way it is. Does anyone in your family have diabetes? Okay, well, you know what? You were doomed. Your grandmother had it, so chances are this is why you have it as well. But don't worry, we'll start you off with some pills. Don't worry about the injections yet. Those will come later. And unfortunately, you will die from this disease. But don't worry. I'm going to hold your hand and walk you through it. Do you want someone holding your hand and walking you through to death? Absolutely not, right? So this is a great pet peeve of mine, just because we need to get the news out there that there is good news and that this is not the case. You do not have to die from this disease, okay? So what's the first thing they'll tell you to do is follow a special diet. And that diet is specifically usually a high protein diet, right? So while high protein intakes do not appear to affect glycemic control, it can be damaging in other ways, especially animal sources. So it does somewhat, it controls your blood sugar levels in the blood, okay? And so that is the reason that they kind of put you in there to help lower those blood sugar levels. Protein above 20% of calories is associated with declining kidney function. So I don't know about the hospitals here, but in Alberta, we are constantly expanding and expanding for people to come in for dialysis treatments. And those dialysis treatments, majority are due to diabetes, their kidneys failing, right? The other thing is high blood pressure. If you have really high blood pressure for long periods of time, that is slowly killing off the kidneys too, and you can end up on dialysis. But diabetes is the #1 reason for ending up on dialysis treatments. And so that's just, again, one of those stages. Nearly 1/3 of individuals with diabetes will develop kidney problems. Once kidney problems start, then tend to follow a fairly predictable downhill course. So I had a school teacher when I went to school, and later in life we reunited, and I met up with him and his wife, and they actually came into a health food store that I owned in Calgary at the time. And she was purchasing some things, and her husband was in the car, and she would say, oh no, I can't have this, he's diabetic. I can't have nuts and seeds, he's diabetic. He can't eat baked potatoes, he's diabetic. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna go out and say hello to him because he's not coming in, and I found out he couldn't walk very well. He's having trouble with his feet and so forth. So I went out and spoke to him. And he was telling me, yes, pretty soon he's going to end up on kidney dialysis, and he's got this diabetes really bad. And so I tried to share some things with him. And he said, no, I have to follow. No, they told me I can't eat this and can't eat that. And, and that was fine. Well, a short time later, sure enough, he ended up on kidney dialysis, so he was going for his treatments. Well, later I ended up with a phone call that he was in the hospital. So we went in to visit him, and he was quite sick, and I was looking over his diet plan, and they had him on diet Jell-O. He was allowed a couple of pieces of iceberg lettuce. He was allowed some chicken and some white bread. And so I was trying to encourage some of the foods that I would recommend, but the dietitian there said, no, this is what he needs to follow to keep his sugars down. Well, about a week later, I got a call and he had one leg amputated. So I went in and visited him again, and he was very concerned about his little dog, while he was in the hospital, and we can help take care of that. And pretty soon I got another call, and we went in, and he had his other leg amputated. Short time later, I got the call, he had passed away. Because at that point, I was very upset, and I thought, you know what, we need to get this word out there. There is really no need for this. This is a very sad, sad disease and sad situation. It really is a downhill course. We got to protect our kidneys right now. High-fat diets can be linked to insulin resistance and or impaired insulin secretion compared to a high carbohydrate diet. That's totally opposite of what we're told, isn't it? So this is where you might think I'm a little bit off, but hang on in there with me, and hopefully by the end I will show you and convince you otherwise. The insulin, when it's being produced very quickly and not able to open the doors to help the glucose connect with it and open, maybe the key isn't fitting, maybe the lock isn't right. When you are told that diabetes is an issue, what is the one thing that you have to restrict? Sugars, exactly. Do you know any diabetics who restrict their sugars really well, and yet their diabetes doesn't reverse or get better, it gets worse? Your answer is right there. The truth is, fat is the issue. It's fat. Fat actually blocks the insulin receptors so that the key cannot go in and fit. Interesting, isn't it? So, when we put people onto a high-fat diet, a high-protein diet, what is connected usually to the protein? It's usually animal protein connected to fat. So we've increased the protein, but we've also increased the fat, right? So the one group of foods they tell you to be careful of is carbs. That's right. Don't be careful of the carbs, right? Because they have a high glycemic index and they'll increase your glucose levels. Okay, well, saturated fats appear to have the most negative effects on insulin action, thus making the animal fats especially a concern. So it's the type of fat that is a concern. Animal fat is saturated fat. The one plant food that also concerns me when I have a diabetic that I work with, that is plant-based and is saturated fat, are peanuts. Peanut oil plays havoc on blood sugar levels. So if you're watching your sugars, you see everyone writing that down. If you find that you're having issues with controlling your sugars and you eat peanuts or peanut butter, change. Use almond butter, use cashew butter. Any other nuts, seeds are fine, but peanut oil is an issue, okay? And we want to try to go with the raw nuts and seeds, though, if you can. Because when we roast them, or when we buy them roasted, they actually have oil on them. And then when you roast them, they're high temperature, and that changes the structure, so they become sort of more of that saturated type fat. But peanut oil and peanuts are the worst, okay? So, high protein diet. Have you ever heard of ketosis? All right, there's actually many diets being right now promoted out there where it's pushing the high protein, right? Putting your body into a state of ketosis. Now, ketosis is actually natural to the body, but in an emergency state. It's made to be your backup. So in an emergency state, that is completely normal. And it's true, it'll burn fat really fast, it'll help control your sugars. But when you're pushed into this overdrive for a long period of time, what happens? Something has to give, right? This high amounts of protein actually is having to be filtered by the blood, so your liver's overworked, but the first things to be hit are the kidneys. So by following a high-protein diet to lose weight quickly can put you in the same state as a diabetic, where you may actually end up with kidney failure, kidney disease, weakened kidneys. So long periods of time, it is not necessarily healthy, okay? There is some ways you can push yourself into that ketogenic type diet, following more of the plant-based proteins in that. And that is not the high risk, the same. But going with all the animal products is a very high risk in that state. So here are the 10 leading afflictions causing death in Canada, according to Statistics Canada. So if you're looking at this, cancer and heart disease are actually the #1 killers, okay? Now, I just told you diabetes is an epidemic, but it's way down here and is only 3%. How can that be? The reason is the majority of deaths that come from diabetes. Do you remember when I said when you're in that pre-diabetic state, you're at that risk of getting diabetes, but you're also at the risk of getting heart disease? That's right. And so here we are now. Why would that be? We push ourselves into this high-protein diet, high saturated fats. We pushed ourselves into the same risk factors or the recipe for creating heart disease as well, haven't we? And so in the end, majority of diabetics die of heart disease. So they fit into the stroke and on heart disease area there. So cancer and heart disease, the 2 leading causes of death, responsible for over just 1/2 of all deaths in Canada. Okay, so let's talk about carbohydrates. Diabetic benefits of a high carbohydrate, high fiber diet. It improves gastrointestinal function. What does that mean? Moves things through quickly, right? We don't want to be blocked up for long periods of time. Reduces body weight if we're overweight. Reduces the risk now of the kidney damage. In response, you will have reduced insulin requirements and improved glycemic control. That's what the outcome is, and isn't that what we're trying to achieve anyways, right? So why is it that we are told to be really careful of carbs, to not have, this is the key, high fiber diet? When you look at carbohydrates, there's actually 2 groups of them, and you might remember this from when I was here last year. There is the simple carbs and a complex carbs, okay? So just a little quick review. Simple carbohydrates are very refined. So your white breads, your white pasta, your white rice, your cakes, your pies, your cookies, right? They have usually very little or no fiber. Secondly, they will add directly to your body fat. They don't have the fiber, they have sugars instantly, right? Peaks your sugars, and then it's converted into the fat, just like you've been taught for carbs, right? Contains a high number of calories, but few nutrients. So it's not nourishing the body, but you're certainly getting a lot of those calories. So what you've been told about carbohydrates is absolutely true following the simple carbohydrates. In this case, what you've been taught is right. However, before I get there, so let me explain what empty calories, right? Lots of calories, but empty in the nutrients. So you could eat a really large meal, walk away, feel full, but then still feel hungry an hour later. Have you ever experienced that? And that's because your body's crying out for the nutrients. You might be full in your stomach, but you're lacking those nutrients. Okay, here's the other swing of the pendulum. And this is the complex carbohydrates. These are your fruits, your vegetables, your whole grains, your nuts, your seeds. These are the carbs that will prevent and reverse type 2 diabetes. They are naturally low in calories. They cannot add directly to your body fat, and they actually increase your metabolism. So you will actually lose weight by eating these foods based on these 3 reasons, right? In this case, complex carbs are what we call full calories. So fewer calories, but packed with nutrients for nutrition. Now, do you think these foods have glucose in them? Definitely. But the right kind of glucose with the fiber. And you put those 2 together, right? So you've got your energy, but you've also got a way of controlling those sugars at a nice level intervals. Okay, so if I'm promoting here a complex carbohydrate diet, Matt, it can probably get a little bit confusing. I am different than a dietitian. I am a doctor in nutrition, and my focus is focusing on what's good to eat and what's not good to eat. And if you focus on the good to eat, I'll tell you you can eat as much as you like until you are nice and full, okay? And so you do not have to worry about getting out your scale and measuring 1 cup of this or half a cup of that or how many ounces of this or how many ounces of that. That exhausts me to even think of it. And most people give up and get frustrated because that's what they're taught they have to do. But you don't have to do that. Instead, make it really simple. Take your dinner plate, and I want you to picture about 2/3 of your dinner plate is going to be the complex carbohydrates. Right? Your fruits, your vegetables, your grains, your nuts, your seeds, that idea, right? Foods as grown. The other little 1/3, about 20, 30%, is going to be your protein. So some of these foods are going to overlap as well, right? Your garnish, more or less, is going to be your fat. So some olives, some avocado, your salad dressing, your nuts, your seeds are going to overlap, right? There's going to be some protein in that. There's going to be some fat in that. And so overlapping is okay, but if you can picture 2/3 of your plate being that majority of the whole grains and the vegetables and salad and whatever, and then the rest approximately, you'll be good. Okay, so you don't have to worry about getting all stressed over that. So, let's say you're not diabetic and you're here just to kind of hear me and to learn and to prevent and whatever. So it's not a problem. Eat as many chocolate bars as you like, right? No. Sugar in general is not good for any of us. Refined sugar is not ideal for any of us. Okay? And so it doesn't matter if you are not diabetic, pre-diabetic, or diabetic, sugar is going to affect us all in the same way. So if we were to have 0 teaspoons of sugar, at this point, your immune system should be working kind of in the optimal level, unless there's other things that are bringing it down, right? So approximately every white blood cell can go out and try to kill off about 4 bacteria, okay? As you increase your teaspoons of sugar, look what happens. 6 teaspoons, now every white blood cell can actually only kill 10 bacteria. 12 teaspoons, 5.5 bacteria. So what happens is the sugar actually begins to paralyze those white blood cells or immobilize them from going out and taking care, right, killing off the pathogens and so forth. 18 teaspoons, it is now down to each white blood cell 2 bacteria. 24 teaspoons, now down to 1 bacteria. So what kind of immune system do you have at this point? Not much of anything, right? So it's not a good thing to keep to continuously be taking in all this sugar, because then we're running no immune system. Now, in saying that, if you were to have a piece of cake for a birthday or something, I'm not saying that you have to be that rigid that you're not allowed a piece of cake here or there or something of that sort, or a cookie or whatever. But the key is to realize what it does do to your immune system, right? And so if you are healthy overall, it's going to bring you back. But sometimes people take that and say, oh, well, you know what? She said I'm okay. It'll bounce back. I'm healthy, so I'll just eat a cookie every meal or a piece of cake every meal, right? So we just have to, of course, be wise. Now, in saying 24 teaspoons, you're probably going, wow, that's a lot. Who eats 24 teaspoons, right? But do you know what the average number of teaspoons is in one day that the average person consumes? 35. 35 teaspoons of sugar. And that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? But you'd be surprised how quickly it can add up. 1 tablespoon of jam or jelly is 3 teaspoons, right? Look, canned fruit, even in a light syrup, not even the heavy syrup, a light syrup, 1 serving is 8 teaspoons of sugar. Pop is where it comes in the biggest. If you are a pop drinker, you can understand how quickly 35 teaspoons can come, right? 1 can of pop is 10 to 12 teaspoons of sugar. And a malted milk, 42 teaspoons in a 12-ounce container. That's quite something, okay? So, it's very quickly how these sugars can come about. And we have to read labels because they're hidden in everything you could imagine. It's even in some of the canned vegetables. It's in frozen hash browns. It's even in some brands of salt. Ketchup, ounce for ounce, is equivalent to ice cream. So the sugar is hidden in there as a preservative, but also as a thing to make us crave it and want to eat it more. Okay, so when, especially you are a diabetic, the doctor will say to use more of an artificial sugar or sweetener, right? And I will tell you now, you are wiser if you have a choice of a diet pop, a can of diet pop, or regular pop, choose the regular pop. I'd rather see you drink 12 teaspoons of sugar than 1 teaspoon of aspartame. And this is the reason artificial sugars were designed to be sugar substitutes as less fattening alternative. That was the sole purpose of these diet products, to be able to invent these artificial sweeteners to promote these diet products. Yogurt, really watch the yogurt. There's a lot of, when it says less sugar, it can mean that there's a little bit of sugar, but they add aspartame. They mix the two, right? Okay, so artificial sweetener additives mimic the flavor of sugar, but with virtually no useful energy. So there's 5 dangerous sugar substitutes that are approved for consumer use. There's actually more than that, but these are your 5 most dangerous ones, and I'm sure you can recognize some of these, right? Saccharin, and especially aspartame, sucralose, those are probably the 3 most common. Sucralose and aspartame are the most pervasive and dangerous substitute found in products on store shelves today. So sucralose in preparation involves chlorinating sucrose. So it's sucrose chlorinated, meaning that there are 3 chlorine atoms for 3 hydroxyl groups. Now that might not make any sense to you, but the point is there's chlorine atoms added to it, and chlorine is a carcinogen. So not a healthy thing, right? Aspartame, on the other hand here, is an additive sold under other names. So be aware of that, like Equal, NutraSweet. Thousands of products containing aspartame, chewing gum. I can't tell you how many people, especially teenagers, that I have helped trying to figure out what's wrong with them, and it comes down to the fact that they're chewing a pack of gum a day, and this aspartame is making them absolutely sick, very, very sick. U.S. Air Force pilots were warned not to consume aspartame in any amount. Why? Because it's been investigated as a possible cause of brain tumors, mental retardation, birth defects, epilepsy, Parkinson's, fibromyalgia, and what? Diabetes. Isn't that something? We're to use aspartame for our diabetes, and it causes diabetes. Go figure, hey? Okay, so good news again. I'm bearer bad, but I'm a better bearer of good news. So, agave nectar. Have you ever heard of that? Comes from a cactus. Well, it is a cactus. Agave holds high amounts of protein-building amino acids and alkaloids. It contains inulin. Inulin is actually a fiber found in plants. Inulin, you've heard of probiotics? Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about them on the night of cancer, but probiotics actually need prebiotics to work in your body. Have you ever heard that? So we're always punching the probiotics, but no one mentions prebiotics. And inulin is a prebiotic. So if you're eating enough plant-based foods, you will have lots of prebiotics. But people who have to take high amounts of probiotics and just don't seem to be able to balance out their intestinal flora, a lot of times they're not eating enough fruits and vegetables and this type of thing to get enough inulin. And so inulin is high in the agave nectar. And so therefore, it has low impact on blood sugar and even cholesterol levels. Now in saying this, when you're purchasing agave nectar, it is wise to make sure it's 100% pure, and if you go organic, it's usually a little bit better chance that it's 100% pure. And the reason I'm telling you this is because agave nectar has taken off to become very popular, and in a lot of cases, half of it is now glucose fructose. So it's not even pure agave nectar anymore. So you need to read your labels in all cases, right? Maple syrup, honey, these are other alternatives that are natural, but if you have diabetes, you may really need to restrict those. Go more with the agave nectar. Xylitol, have you heard of xylitol? That's the new one that's really taking off right now. It actually comes from two sources. Here I've put that it comes from birch trees, so it does come from birchwood, but it also comes from corn silk. Don't buy the one that's from corn silk. So if you're buying xylitol, read the ingredients, make sure it comes from birchwood. Corn silk, it's not bad for you, but it can cause a lot of intestinal upset. People end up in serious intestinal pain, stomach pain, and can't figure out why, and it's coming from the xylitol. And it's usually a cheaper way, right? Corn silk is cheap, so it's a byproduct, and so they're able to produce the xylitol cheaper than the birchwood xylitol. So xylitol, here it says, the source that I got it from in this case, says it looks and tastes the same and has 40% less calories. Recognized by dentists worldwide, it is proven now to actually help your teeth, help your eyesight, and help your hearing. Pretty interesting, isn't it? So it has a number of health benefits to it. So again, it's a popular sweetener for diabetics, but for anyone now. That is one thing with the diet, the ketosis diet. They promote xylitol and lowering your sugar. So that is a very positive thing about that diet that's out there right now. And so xylitol has become popular, probably more because of that diet right now. So it's absorbed slower into the bloodstream and doesn't spike your sugars. Out of them all, stevia is the number one. If you have diabetes, get into using stevia. Now, you might tell me it tastes really gross or it has a bad aftertaste. There are some good companies that are coming out with better ones now where they're doing, adding a little something or changing a little something to take away that aftertaste of stevia. And so there is one that is by the Now brand, and it's called Better Stevia. And that one does not have that after flavor, and they have it in drops and little tablets and powders and all sorts of things in little packages. It is very potent. 1 teaspoon of stevia concentrated powder equals over a cup of sugar. So it's very potent, right? So it's quite expensive, but if you think about it, 1 teaspoon equals 1 cup. So it goes a far ways. The good news is 0 calories. 0 calories. And if you ever deal with something like candida yeast or things where you can't have the sugars, it does not feed sugars in your body. So it's an excellent sweetener. It's a natural plant. The raw leaves of the stevia plant are 40 times sweeter than sugar. And the powder can be 200 to 300 times because it's dehydrated and concentrated, right? The interesting thing as well is it actually balances your blood sugar levels. Balances it. So I'll tell people, if your sugars are off, make yourself either put in a drop or two of stevia into some water and drink it, or if you have the leaves, steep yourself a cup of tea, and it'll help to balance those sugars out. So just think, you can have sweet things and balance your sugars at the same time. Doesn't that just sound amazing? The other brand of stevia is called New Roots. It's a supplement company, actually. But New Roots makes a stevia, and they take something from the beets, not the beet sugar, but something else from the beets, and use as part of it to take away that after bitter flavor as well. So those, I'm sure there's other companies that are improving all the time, but those are the 2 that I promote that do taste better. If you've got discouraged in the past, definitely look and try those. Okay, so we mentioned about fats. Fats being an issue for diabetes, right? But we need fat in our body, but we need good fat. We need it for a number of reasons. Building our immune system, balancing hormones. Both of those we'll be talking about in the next couple of nights. So what is a bad fat? Bad fat would include saturated fats, excess amounts or heated unsaturated fats. So your saturated fats would be your bad fat. Saturated meaning from animal fat, right, specifically. Excess amounts are heated unsaturated fats. So this is where the unsaturated fats is our better choice, but too much of it can become a bad thing, right? Too much of a good thing can become a bad thing. Do you remember that from last time? It's my favorite saying. So hydrogenated oils, taking a good oil and heating it, can become a bad oil for us. So even chips, crackers, these kind of things can affect our blood sugar levels, but by blocking those insulin receptors. So the peanut oil I talked about, it actually is blocking those insulin receptors. Your good fat are known as essential fatty acids. They are essential because your body cannot make them. They have to come from the food that you eat. These are known as your omega-3 and your omega-6 fatty acids. So your omega-3 and 6, you do need both of them, but omega-6 is found in more foods than omega-3. Therefore, we need to focus on specifically getting in more omega-3 fats in our food. What are the benefits of taking in these good fats? Anti-inflammatory, anti-pain. So people with arthritis, chronic pain, right? And anti-inflammatory also means with heart disease. Heart disease is inflammation in the lining of the arteries of your heart. So it'll actually take out inflammation anywhere in the body. Anti-blood clotting keeps your blood running nice and smooth so that your cells don't stick and clump together. Lowers blood pressure if you have high blood pressure. Hormonal balance, talk about that tomorrow night. Cholesterol levels, it'll help to bring down the bad level of cholesterol by raising your good level. Decreases blood triglyceride, which is the fat in the blood. The good fat will help remove the bad fat out of the bloodstream as long as you're within the right percentile. Stimulating immune response, so boosting your immune system. So here's our omega-3. Pure omega-3 is found in flax seeds and walnuts. And that's why we're always pumping the flaxseed idea, because it's a pure omega-3 fat. Now, see how it has a really hard shell on it? In order to obtain that nutrient of omega-3, you need to grind those and break down that shell. Otherwise, it'll just slip right through you or get stuck in your intestinal tract if you happen to have diverticulitis or something like that. So you want to grind those before using them. In this shell, you can keep them on your cupboard and they will never go bad. They are so protected in that shell, they will stay for a long time. As soon as you grind them, they begin to break down now, okay? So with this omega-3 fat, it's the healthiest for you, but it's also the most sensitive oil. You have to be really careful with it because it's really good for you or it can become extremely dangerous for you if you don't treat it well. There's 3 things that can damage these kind of oils, and one is heat. So the actual flaxseed oil you don't want to cook with. You want to keep that in a cold form, for example. If you grind this and put it into muffins or bread or something, then the dough is protecting it, and that's okay to bake with it. And it's in that fiber state still. But the oil especially is extremely dangerous. It becomes a carcinogen as soon as you're heating it. So do not cook with flaxseed oil. Okay, the second thing is light. So that is why when we grind this, we want to put it into a dark container. Or if you've ever bought already ground flaxseed meal, it comes in a bag that you can't see through, right? To keep the light out of. And oxygen. So a sealed container so the oxygen can't begin to oxidize that. Okay? Walnuts. What do walnuts look like? A brain. That's right. Because these essential fats especially nourish the brain. So we need fats, but we need these good, healthy fats. How much fat? So I said staying within your percentile. You want, remember your dinner plate, about approximately up to 20%, the most of fat. So 18 to 20% is good. If you have heart disease or diabetes, you may want to even cut that slightly more. But approximately 18 to 20%. So if you're a person on a 2,000 calorie diet, for example, then you would consume about 44 grams of fat per day. Now that 44 grams of fat is any fat, whether it's good fat or bad fat, but of course we want it to be as much as possible the good fat, right? Because we need it. So how quickly the bad fat especially can add up, and one trip to McDonald's will do you in right there, pretty fast. But even notice here, 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil. So the vegetable oil may be our better choice, of course. Maybe it's olive oil, right? Maybe putting olive oil on your popcorn instead of butter or margarine or something like that. Just that is a better choice. But just keep in mind, 1 tablespoon, when it's in the liquid form, it's concentrated. So 1 tablespoon is already 14 grams of fat. Okay? So how quickly even olive oil can add up. It's good for us, it's healthy for us, but once we're out of that 20 percentile range, it can become harmful to us. Cheese is probably the biggest thing that is, cheese is concentrated fat and concentrated protein. So, even worse than meat, cheese is the #1 thing that destroys the body in many different ways. It'll progress even diseases like MS, Parkinson's. It just plays havoc to the whole system, circulation especially in that. So it's very concentrated. 1 ounce of cheese is approximately a centimeter to 1 inch cube of cheese, and that's 7 to 9 grams. But can you imagine how many centimeter cubes is on a piece of pizza? So there's a lot of fat in cheese, so we have to be careful of that. 1 ounce of potato chips, 1 ounce, 8.5 grams. Now, watch this. If we were to go with the whole carbohydrates, right, foods as grown, compare now that 1 ounce of potato chips, 8.5 grams, you could have an entire whole baked potato and get only 1/4 of a gram. How many baked potatoes do you think you can eat before you're full? Quite a few, right? I mean, not quite a few, but very few. And so imagine, how many potato chips can you eat before you get full? It's easy to do the whole bag, isn't it, right? So when we're saying that carbs can make us fat or cause us issues, if we're eating these carbs, definitely makes sense, right? But if we're eating these carbs, it's going to take you quite a few potatoes to get to 44 grams of fat, isn't it? So I don't know how many of you feel like eating 160 potatoes, but that would do it. 1 cup of spaghetti, 1 to 2 grams. 2 slices of bread, 1 to 2 grams. 1 cup of rice, 1 to 2 grams. Now we're talking the whole grain, right? And the brown rice and the brown whole grain pastas. The problem with these carbs, you can see how much you can eat. You can eat until you are full and you are satisfied. The problem comes in is what we put on these foods. So we take a lot of times the fats or the simple carbs, and those are the things we're putting on top of the good carbs, and that's where that fat escalates. So for example, a baked potato, what could you put on a baked potato instead of butter, sour cream, cheese, right? So what would you do instead now? Salsa? Coconut oil, okay, yeah, you could use a little coconut oil instead of butter, sure. And yogurt, okay, Greek yogurt, yeah. There's coconut yogurts even now, which is like a Greek yogurt actually, the Dea yogurts. Salsa, someone said. You could do broccoli. Do you remember that cheese sauce I taught you last time? For those who were here, there's like a cashew cheese sauce. It goes lovely on the baked potatoes. So there's other options. It's just a matter of training our taste buds a little bit. Spaghetti, you can still do your tomato sauce, your spaghetti sauce, your marinara sauce. And I'm going to be giving you a recipe this week for a lovely Alfredo sauce that you'll enjoy. And so thinking about what we're putting on it is the key. Now, why is the fat content so low in those kind of whole foods? The reason is because the fiber in the food. So, if you forget everything else from this evening, I want you to remember this. When it comes to diabetes, the key word is fiber. If you always think fiber, everything else will fall into place. Everything else I'm teaching you tonight, you've got it. If it doesn't have fiber, you know that it didn't fit in, right? So you want fiber. Fiber is what controls those blood sugar levels. So diseases associated with a low fiber diet, diabetes, #1. But you can see here a number of other diseases that are affected by a low fiber diet. So we need fiber in our diet. So for the average person, we want to aim for about 35 grams of fiber a day. But if you are diabetic, you want to aim for 45 to 50 grams of fiber per day. So really important, punch the fiber. So fiber, 2 kinds of fiber, and you need both kinds. Okay? Water-soluble and insoluble. So water soluble means dissolves in water, right? So you can think of maybe oat bran, for example, will dissolve in water. And insoluble would be something like wheat bran. You put it in water and it just floats, okay? But we need both kinds of fiber. Insoluble basically acts as a stool volume for the stool, reducing the transit time to clear out the intestinal tract. Water soluble helps to lower cholesterol levels, especially lowering blood sugar level response and insulin requirements after a carbohydrate-rich meal. So it is that fiber that's going to lower the blood sugar response and your insulin requirements. Where is fiber found? Fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, legumes. Did you hear me mention those earlier? Pretty cool, right? These are your complex carbs. They are the ones that have all your fiber in them. This is the reason that we're punching the complex carbs, but unfortunately we're being told to remove them out of our diet, and that is why the disease is progressing to a point now it's become an epidemic. We're not going about it in the right way. If we can instead reverse that and punch the fiber and push those complex carbs, we can reverse this epidemic. Animal proteins or products, meat, eggs, milk, cheese, any animal product whatsoever has how much fiber? None. So not only is it the saturated fat that's an issue, it's the fact that it even has no fiber. So in reality, it's suicide, isn't it? We're actually just setting ourselves up for trouble by following this protocol instead of this protocol. So, focusing on fiber. What foods have fiber? You know the categories now. But just showing you, look at some of these ones here, at the amount of fiber, grams here. 1 cup of garbanzo beans or chickpeas. By the way, these are the same thing. Garbanzo beans and chickpeas are the same. Nutrient value, everything. It's just the size is the only difference, okay? But look at, in 1 cup, 15.4 and 8.6. Add those together. How much is that? 24. 24 grams of fiber. And you need how much? 35, right? And then if you're diabetic, 45 to 50, right? So here you get 24 grams. For a diabetic, you're halfway there by just eating 1 cup of garbanzo or chickpeas. Imagine, right? So, here is the key. You'll notice most of the things here are a lot of beans. Beans are your highest source of fiber. Out of all those foods, your beans are packed with fiber. So, what you want to do is actually incorporate them in the way of throwing them on your salad. You want to throw them in your soups, in your stews, make a nice topping for on top of your brown rice, right? On top of your baked potato, on top of your pasta. You know, this week, how many of you like chickpeas or garbanzo beans? That's why I've had them almost every day this week for lunch. I had to laugh, and I went to different people's house, and I was getting chickpeas. I thought, I wonder if they like chickpeas out here. So I don't even have to convince you. So this is great. But any of these beans are superior for that. Now, in saying that, if I have people that have a hard time getting beans in or enough fiber in, I will tell them to treat them like vitamin pills. To actually have a little fruit dish and put in a couple of tablespoons of beans and have them at your breakfast. Have your normal breakfast, but before you eat it, you eat those beans first and then enjoy your normal breakfast. Putting in 2 tablespoons of beans, you've already pumped up your fiber a little bit, and it's first thing in the morning, which helps control your blood sugars for the day. So however you can do it, go for it. Now, what about hummus? Do you like hummus? Yes. So do you think there's as much fiber in hummus as there is if you were to eat the 1 cup of chickpeas whole? What happens to it?
Process. Life is going out of it.
Maybe. It's really not processed much because you're just blending it down. So it's like chewing it, right? So actually the majority of the fiber is there. And the fiber is still there for you. So you can actually enjoy things like hummus and still know you're getting good fiber. Okay, physical inactivity. You like my dog. Okay, it's not my dog. Let's clarify that again. The picture of a dog. So, physical inactivity. That is what's happening today. You know, I was asking today if there's a lot of people that walk here. Do you see it? Do a lot of people walk out here? Yeah? Okay, good. It's funny, I went for a walk today and I see people looking at me like I'm really crazy. Like, what is she doing on the road? Is she lost? You know? Maybe it's because it was so cold out and they just thought I was crazy after May Roberts. I don't know, but I thought, and I didn't see anybody else. Each time I've been here, I really don't see a lot of people walking out in that area. So up on the hill, wherever that is that I am, I guess I gotta start a walking club up there maybe. So we're actually getting less activity than what's even required for good health. So we're not talking additional activity to help us reverse diabetes or additional activity to help us lose weight. We're talking about activity to even stay walking and talking, right? And so 54% of adults report little or no regular physical activity. Most teenagers are not performing regular vigorous activity unless they are specifically signed up for a sports team or something. And we know that obesity is increasing in both adults, children, and even pets. So here's a couple of studies that were done. Fitness lowering the risk of early death in diabetics. So if you have diabetes, walking will reduce your risk of an early death. So here is somebody who never exercises. And what we try to promote is that you exercise a half hour a day, 5 days a week. So that totals how many hours? 2.5, right? You can do more, definitely. But if you can aim for a half hour a day for 5 days a week, that's 2.5 hours. Look here, if you were to do no exercise, okay, now suddenly you did 2 hours a week, not even, that's 4 times a half hour a week, you decrease your risk of an early death by 40% just from walking a half hour 4 times a week. If you were to walk 3 to 4 hours a week, you now reduce your risk by 55%, right? So that's pretty easy, isn't it? Half hour a day. If you can find a half hour a day, you will easily reduce your risk just there. What are some ideas that you can do? So we want to aim for that half hour a day approximately, or more or less burning 150 calories. And so brisk walking fits into that 30 minutes a day. Running, of course, is half time then, right? But even raking leaves, active gardening, swimming, these all count as exercise. Water, another thing that's really important for balancing blood sugars as well. Keeping well hydrated helps keep both the body and mind peak efficiency. Aim for 6 to 8 glasses a day. If you're working out, exercising, or if it's hot out, of course you're going to need a little bit more as you sweat, right, as you expire. Water cools the body. Notice it doesn't say cold water cools the body, right? We actually want it to be room temperature. And when you drink the liquid of water, it naturally cools the inner temperature of our body. It'll prevent fatigue, it'll get rid of waste, and it's essential for good circulation. We'll talk a little more about this again this week, but the big thing here is, for diabetics again, or controlling our blood sugars in general, is being able to drink water in place of drinks that have a lot of sugar in them. Now, some people say to me, yeah, but I drink coffee, and coffee has water. The unfortunate part is, it's right, it contains caffeine that actually will pull the water out of your system as well. So coffee does not count for your 6 to 8 glasses of water. What about juice? Again, some people buy the frozen concentrate and they say, well, they add water. Still does not count. And in fact, if we're trying to be careful of how much sugar that we're taking in, when we've removed that fiber, we now have that juice that is very sweet and can spike our sugars. So we're better off, you can eat the whole fruit because it contains all that fiber, but the juice itself We just have to, be careful not to overdose. Sip it, enjoy it as kind of part of that meal if you're going to have it, okay? All right, the human body, 75% water, 25% solid matter. Do you think that we need water? Yeah. So one of the very last indicators of dehydration of the body is dry mouth. When we say, oh, I have a dry mouth, I'm thirsty, you're already dehydrated. You should actually drink water before you get thirsty. Right? A lot of times we actually ignore that thirst mechanism. When we start to get thirsty, we ignore it, and eventually the body stops telling us when we need it. This is the most interesting part. By the time your mouth gets dry, it becomes an indicator of water shortage. Many delicate functions of the body have been shut down and prepared for deletion. So we're already dehydrated. Juvenile diabetes, type 1 diabetes now, childhood diabetes, we are finding that the insulin-producing cells of the pancreas are sacrificed as a result of persistent dehydration. So this isn't going to be broadcasted out there, I can almost tell you that, but studies are showing this. Do babies need water? Yes. Are they human? They're 75% water. They're going to weigh less than us. They're going to require less than us, but they still require water. Now, when you breastfeed a baby, the milk is made so that it's pretty much water at the beginning and turns to extra fat towards the end. So we're kind of created to take care of the dehydration process, so the risk is lower. But to still give them a few drops of water is very good between feedings. Now, a baby, though, who takes in formula, formula-fed babies are at a high risk for persistent dehydration. And this can push them into that type 1 diabetes state, right? Or SIDS is the other thing that increases their risk, and we're finding it's a dehydration state that happens to these babies. So making sure, especially if babies are formula fed, they especially need some water between. And as I mentioned, with age and with time, eventually our thirst mechanism is gradually lost as we ignore the fact that, the symptoms of being thirsty or needing water. So let's review some factors contributing to diabetes. Lack of exercise, use of meat or animal products in general, right? Lack of fiber, refined sugar, high-fat diet, refined products, so your refined simple carbohydrates, obesity, and alcohol. Alcohol plays a role in the body like sugar. It is sugar. In fact, it's kind of interesting. I like to give the example that when people say, oh, he had too much sugar, he's hyper. In many cases, if you were to actually draw a blood sample and test it, the alcohol levels in his blood or her blood can be very high to a point that they are not just hyper, they are drunk. And so when you think of a child, when they get sugar, they get this high and then they drop low, or they're drunk and then they have a hangover. And that's actual reality. If you were testing their blood, in many cases they would come out alcohol in the bloodstream. So if alcohol works like a sugar. So what do you think? Did we make it simple? Is it something you think everyone could achieve? Definitely. It's going to take some time, right? Because we change out certain things. I heard one doctor say, anytime you substitute spaghetti for steak, you're further ahead. So sometimes it's a matter of making it just one meal a week that you want to change, and begin with that, and then slowly keep increasing as you can find new recipes, new ideas. But it works. Trust me, it works. So over the years, I have had the privilege of doing a number of different programs. I've also had the opportunity of working with clients. And one of the programs we would do would be over a 4-week program where we would do a heart screen or a blood draw first, and at the end of the 4 weeks, we would repeat that. And in those 4 weeks, people's blood sugar levels would just drop amazingly. And we would see people come in on insulin injections, and by the end of the 3-4 weeks, they were off all medications. So it is definitely achievable. I had a client, a lady, who called me up. Someone had suggested my name to her, and she called me up in a big panic and said, I need to come see you. When is your soonest opening? Like, I need to come today. I just need to get this under control. My sugars are 14 right now, and the doctor wants to put me on insulin injections. So I need to do something. Help me. I'm told you can help me. So I let her come that afternoon. I met with her, and I began. I sat down with her and started to go through. The first thing I start on is the diet. You know, what is your diet normally like? What kind of thing do you eat? And she says, vegetables, all vegetables. That's all I eat. I eat lots of vegetables. And so I try to review a few things. Yeah, it's just vegetables. And I thought, wow, okay, I got to work out here. I got to figure this one out. So, okay, let's break this down more. What did you have for breakfast? Well, I had some bacon, eggs, toast, and I thought, vegetables. Phew, okay, this is easy. I'm back on track. Okay, what did you have for lunch? Well, for lunch I just had a ham and cheese sandwich, but I had the salad. I had a big salad. Okay, good. What's supper going to be? Supper's going to be shepherd's pie. And I said, okay. So I began, just tell me, whatever you want me to do, I will do it. Well, by the end of that talk, I wasn't sure she was that happy that she said that to me, but she was willing. She said, I will do whatever. Okay, I will stop. I'll stop all animal products. I will do what you tell me. Now, the good news was I told her she could go home and she could have a baked potato. I told her she could enjoy some mango. And she was a little bit nervous. You know, she's going to drop over dead. I said, no, trust me, you're okay. But some of the fruits like your pineapple, banana, grapes, go easy in the beginning. Keep, the ones that are higher sugars, you just want to really limit in the beginning, okay? And then I just really encouraged her the salad, for sure, salad at least one meal there a day, either lunch, supper, whatever, and just kind of work through with her about the beans and so forth. So she went home. And I should mention, I did mention about, juices, stop the juices, and really watch your dried fruits for the first few weeks as well, okay? So she went home and she started. Well, she was doing good, and a week later she's calling me up and saying, well, can I have this, or can I have some of that? And yeah, it's good. And she is one as well that tend to snack on peanuts every night. So I told her to stop the peanuts as well. 2 weeks in, she calls me up. Oh, and by the way, I should tell you, her sugars were 14 on medication. And that's why she was the next step for the insulin now, okay? So that was on medication. At the end of 2 weeks, she calls me up in a panic, and she's starting, I don't know what to do. She says, I think I'm going to drop over dead. I said, what's wrong? She says, well, I'm off all medication, and my sugars are 4. What if they keep dropping? I said, they're not going to keep dropping. You're okay. Now you can start to have whatever fruit you want, and dried fruit, have some dried fruit. And I mean, for anyone, it's not wise to eat a whole container of dried fruit anyways, but so enjoy it, just a normal level. And so away she went. And it's been 2 years, and she is completely free of any diabetes issues. Now, she says she goes to her different church functions, and she takes some of her own food because she can't eat the steak dinner or whatever. Now, in saying that, she's gone pretty strong plant-based diet. She just 100%. And in many cases, people can have, a little bit of dairy or something like that here or there, and it doesn't affect them. But she said, why do I want to do that? This has given me life. I am going to stick with this. And so some thought she was crazy. She said, the hardest part is my family think I'm crazy. But she said, I told them, well, if you think me hanging around you for the next how many years, that might be a little crazy. You're right, but that's what's going to happen, so get used to it. So it is good news, and it is obtainable, absolutely obtainable. And so I hope that you try it. I tell people, you might think I'm crazy, but if you can try it for 3 weeks, you can go back to the way you were eating and living and whatever at the end of the 3 weeks if you find it doesn't work. But I can almost put money on it that in 3 weeks your life will be changed. So give it a try for sure. Any questions? Yes?
Just one on stevia. You mentioned that as a good alternative to sugar, that kind of thing. But when you go to buy stevia, do you need to buy it in the leaf, the green? Because you notice in the stores it's white.
It is white. It is refined. This is true.
And there's some sugars added to that as well.
And that's where you gotta make sure, that's why a couple of those brands that I recommend, are more pure. The New Roots they have their own lab, they do their own. It is true, the greener it is, the more pure it is. The whiter it is, it's more refined, and you have to watch because some of them are bleached, the same way as white sugar is bleached, right? So you want to go with a good name. Now, if you can find the plant and use the leaf or dry the leaves, and that's optimal if you can do that. Yeah. Yes.
Better with the liquid one, is that okay to use?
Yes, the liquid ones are fine too. Now, when it comes to the liquids, they are sometimes have alcohol in it because they use the alcohol to extract it out of the leaves. And that can have kind of a yucky flavor in itself. I don't like it, but the Now brand has a vegetable glycerin base. And so it also has the non-alcohol choice. So it's an optional. And then they also have flavored ones now. So if they're naturally flavored, that's fine too. So they have, like the Now brand has hazelnut oil added into it, and another one is, they have a few different flavors anyways, the vanilla, and those are optional too. But the liquids are fine, and again, it's just like one drop is full, but for baking, the powders are a little handier.
Yes, you mentioned the high fiber diet. It sounds like you weren't getting enough fiber. Could you take an additive, like at the end of the day, because you're going to get out that day? Should you?
Take like
increase enough the fiber that,
yes. Okay, so the question was, if you feel you didn't get enough fiber in for the day, can you take something like a supplement or something of that sort? So like psyllium husk is a really great, a good fiber, and certainly it wouldn't hurt you, for sure.
you really got to aim for that high fiber.
You want to aim for that high fiber, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Ground flaxseed is good too. Yeah, either or. Yeah. Yes.
Can you discuss the difference in using butter or margarine? What
Sure. When it comes to butter or margarine, they're both fat, right? And so we want to limit whichever one it is anyways that we're choosing. Butter has cholesterol and saturated fat. So those two automatically are bad for the heart disease and the diabetes idea. However, the margarine is also very processed, right? And that is dangerous too because it can be carcinogen and whatever. So this is where someone mentioned the coconut oil is something that you could use instead of butter or margarine, can work well. The thing with coconut oil is it's very concentrated. So you just have to be careful not to overdose on it, but to use it on toast or something instead of butter or margarine is great. Some people I know like it on popcorn, bad idea. There's also something that is called earth balance butter. Or buttery spread. It's not a butter, it's not a margarine, but it's made with the cold pressed oils and tastes really nice. That's a nice option too. I think there was one hand back here first. Okay, maybe not. Go
I
ahead.
was just pointing somebody else.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I have a question. What causes a diabetic coma?
That is where the sugars are so high, that's where you end up into that diabetic coma. So where all the glucose gets backed up, it's not going to let it into the cells, and then you end up into that state where you go into the coma and die from it.
I have a friend who died.
Who died of it?
39.
Oh,
Just
just recently. How old?
44.
44. Now, did you know she
Was diabetic.
and she knew she was diabetic?
Yeah, she went to bed and her husband tried to wake her.
Correct.
Yeah.
She went into that
And
state.
I also lost a high school friend last year for the same thing. She was 45.
Wow. I lost a grandfather the same way.
I never understood what a diabetic coma was, and then
Yeah.
this happened 2 days ago. Like the funeral
Exactly.
tomorrow, it's just like,
Wow, very sad.
yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah. Yes, so for sure, you can see how it's become that epidemic. For sure. Yes.
Well, sugars that are too low are dangerous, more dangerous than too high, as long as you don't go into coma.
Right. You do need the glucose for energy, right?
Yes.
Correct. And that is where you have to make sure, usually that happens though, from people just not eating.
Yeah, but if you take too much, if you take insulin for a certain amount of food that you're going to eat, you end up not eating it, and then you
That's
go
right.
under and you're still in hospital.
Absolutely, you're correct, that's right. Yes, in that case, using medication, that can happen, yes. But otherwise, if you're not on medication, the only risk of dropping too low would be if you're not eating well. Yeah, yeah, but no, that's a good point to say, absolutely. Yes,
What about dry cereal?
dry cereals,
Like,
yes.
I eat a lot of multigrain and Cheerios.
Okay, so multigrain Cheerios, those ones are actually fairly high in sugar, unfortunately, because they're multigrain. The plain is actually less sugar than the multigrain.
I have a plain too, but I don't eat them as much.
Yeah, and they're better. Yeah. So just read, again, it's the type of sugars that's in the cereal is a problem. One thing I always laugh about is bran buds. Bran buds, people use bran buds for constipation, right? Because of the fiber. There's equal amounts of sugar to the fiber in that cereal. Sugar blocks you, the fiber unblocks you. So I think that's the whatever you call it, their madness, to their method of their madness, is so that you keep buying it. So yeah, sugar is quite high in cereals. And I mean, shredded wheat is a better choice, and of course that one, but you know, shredded Cheerios are on the better end, but the plain ones, yeah.
So,
Yes.
I'll make a lot of bran muffins and stuff like
Sure.
that. So there's like a quarter cup of sugar, brown sugar for 12 muffins.
Correct.
So I found that that's a fairly good.
Yes, that is a fairly good one. And there's other choices you can do too, like you can do coconut sugar. I don't know if you've ever tried coconut sugar. It tastes like brown sugar, but it's from the coconut nectar flour, and so the glycemic index is much lower. So that's an option you could try as well. Yes.
You get things for breakfast like steel cut oats and stuff like that. Now, that's isn't that a protein based? You know, again, it's high in fiber, but
Correct.
so how is that for a?
That reminds me, I'm glad you said that. So, on your handout here, we'll tell you how much protein we need according to age groups as well. On the back gives you some ideas of how much protein is in certain foods. Now, we need protein. So, if the key is not too much protein. Most of our diseases today is not due to not enough protein, it's due to too much protein. The average person takes in 3 times the amount of protein on a daily basis than what we should. So imagine taking in 3 times the amount, and now we're told to go on a high protein diet. We're already on high protein diets, right? So, but we still need protein. And I'll share with you on Thursday night some studies relating to cancer when it comes to protein, and how the plant protein is different than animal protein, because animal protein is very concentrated, but your plant protein has the fiber as well. And so it's a healthy protein. With the exception of tofu. Tofu is very refined and does not have the fiber. And so in that case, it's very concentrated protein, so you have to limit that more and eat it with food that has fiber, right? But for example, your cereal, the steel cut oats, yeah, it's got some protein, that's great, we want some protein, it's got the fiber, it's got other nutrients, absolutely excellent. And that is why oatmeal is promoted as for helping to balance sugars. Oatmeal in general, yeah. Yes?
You had mentioned about the fact that fat was what caused the cell to shut down or lock out the insulin from the cell. But those in type 2 diabetes who need injections, how does the insulin get into the cell then, simply because it's injected? What does it do that allows it to get into the cell?
Well, what's happening is the pancreas is overproducing insulin, so it does eventually get into the cell, but it takes a lot more flooding of that insulin, and then the pancreas wears out from flooding it, so now we're injecting it, so we're still flooding the system of insulin, so some does get through, but it's still having to be flooded, and it's always so up and down because of it, right? So that's also the risk. We're kind of guessing how much insulin, and we're kind of trying, you know, it comes to a point that you're able to regulate it according to how your body is receiving it or
Just
not.
to add on to that, doesn't insulin increase the body's ability to produce fat or get?
Absolutely, good point too. Yes, it does, and that's why we will gain weight.
Right.
That's right, eventually, and that's why diabetics are always struggling to lose weight, and no matter what they do, they can't, because that insulin is storing the fat. Good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes,
One more. Vitamins, in certain vitamins that you take, magnesium, potassium.
Yeah.
Do they also affect insulin and?
No.
Nothing at
most
all?
of those things do not. No, most cases you're okay. Yeah, at least the ones you're mentioning, the common nutrients.
So there's no regards to the vitamins or a multivitamin that you would take or to decrease or anything like that?
You are low in some things. It's interesting. For example, the mineral chromium, you will lack chromium when you are diabetic. Chromium helps burn fat cells and it also helps to regulate blood sugar levels. But where is chromium found in? Our whole grains. And so if we're cutting out carbs and going high proteins, no wonder we're low in chromium, right? And then that throws off our sugars and helps us gain weight as well. So as far as vitamins and minerals go, yes, you can take the supplements, it's not going to interfere with anything. But by changing this diet to more of those whole carbs, you're going to automatically be getting a much better, a more, flooding with more nutrients. Yes?
I was wondering about 3 different products. The first one is Splenda, and for water, you can buy 2-liter bottles of sparkling water. Is that the same?
That's, yeah.
And Basil.
Okay, so Basil margarine, for example, if you're going to use a margarine, it is one of your better choices because it is unhydrogenated, right? So that is a better choice, yes.
And sparkling water?
Sparkling water is just carbonated water. Yeah, so that doesn't have your sugars and stuff. And the other was Splenda?
Splenda and grapeseed oil.
Grapeseed oil is okay too, yes, yes. Grapeseed oil, when you are baking with it, can go to a nice high temperature. However, in saying that, you just want to really be watching all your oils in general, right? Because remember, every tablespoon is 14 grams. So limiting your oil, yes.
And
Splenda, okay, so I'm hoping I got this right. What is the other one that is popular? Splenda and NutraSweet or Twin, okay. Splenda and Twin. I'm trying to remember which one now. I think it is one of them anyways, if you read, maybe both of them are now, coming out with actually a stevia sugar. So read on the box what it is. Now you will see something, I know on the one that has stevia, one of them is 100% stevia, and the other one has a bit of what is called erythritol, which is a sugar from alcohol. But it is supposedly not a chemical sugar, and it is okay as well. It reacts to the body or responds to the body the same way as kind of stevia does. So 0 calories as well. So the one that says erythritol stevia, the other one says just stevia, but then some of the others have, the rest is chemical. So all of those are bad, Twin and all these are bad, except for now the fact they have the new ones coming out that are stevia. So just watch for the stevia ones. Yes. Yes?
Stevia soft drinks.
Stevia is excellent. Yep. Yeah, those new stevia pops. Yeah, they're natural fruit and no artificial coloring and stevia sweetened. So if you like pop, that's a good option. Keep in mind that sometimes the carbonated drinks have a lot of carbon dioxide. So it's the phosphoric acid that can be, if there's phosphoric acid in some of these, which I don't believe that one has. So, but in some of like even the carbonated waters or something, just kind of check, because if it has phosphoric acid, it'll leach calcium out of your bones. So it's just not a good thing to be heavy into either, but if it doesn't have the phosphoric acid, you're okay. Yeah.
Chia seeds beneficial?
Yes, chia seeds and hemp hearts are both a nice equal balance of omega-3 and 6. They are equally balanced. So I encourage if you want to use hemp hearts or chia seeds, that's great, but also include extra either flaxseed oil, or walnuts so that you can boost your omega-3 a little higher, just because chia and hemp hearts are equal balance. But the nice thing about chia and hemp hearts is they are a complete protein. So your chia seeds have about 4 grams of protein in every tablespoon, and your hemp hearts have 7 grams of protein in every tablespoon. And it's complete protein, which is nice. Yes?
I know that you mentioned about omega-3s, and a lot of people say that omega-3 in fish oil, or fish oil tablets, or mackerel, or sardines, or whatever is high. Is that a better base as opposed to like flaxseed, or as a supplement, or do you get those omega-3s in there?
Good question. I know where I am right now. I have to answer this delicately. It is correct, fish oils are your omega fats, your omega-3 and 6, and that is the reason why we say fish is brain food, right? So it does contain that. The risk with the fish is contamination now, but also the fact that it has cholesterol. So if you're wanting to avoid the cholesterol in that, then the flaxseed oil and the walnuts are equivalent as good. It's in the omega-3 fat itself, and then you're just minusing the contamination or the cholesterol in that. Yes.
So regardless of one being higher in
No.
the-
Correct. Yeah. And the thing is, too, when it comes to fish, people don't realize how much cholesterol it has. In most cases, fish has the same amount of cholesterol as chicken and red meat. So if you're trying to lower your cholesterol, the fish plays that role. Yeah. But yeah, no, those seeds and plant-based things with the omegas, your chia, your hemp heart, those are all very good. Yeah.
How many grams did you say were in chia?
4 grams protein in chia and 7 in hemp hearts per tablespoon, and it's a complete protein. Yes. Berries, I will touch on those another night. All I can say is they're very good. Absolutely. Any fruit, when it comes to diabetes, all fruits, all vegetables are healthy for you, right? It's just as you're lowering them, be just gradual with some of those ones that are higher in the sugars. Yes? Is it good to give up meat altogether? In my personal opinion, absolutely. I used to be a big meat and dairy eater, and I am completely plant-based. Yeah, I've seen too many good stories come out of it that I can't be convinced otherwise. Yes?
Processed vegan foods, like
Right.
if they're tofu based, they're probably not that good for you, are they? Or
So that is right. Really, if I dare say that there's a good meat eater and a bad meat eater, right?
yeah,
There's a good vegetarian and a poor vegetarian, absolutely. And
Yeah.
so some of these processed foods, they are marketed to make money, right? And they want to reach everybody. And so there are a number of vegan things that are out there that may not necessarily be ideal. They are plant-based, but they have been processed, they've been changed, they have high amounts of oil and so forth. So you do have to watch for that, for sure. Tofu itself, like I said, is refined in the way that it's concentrated and the fiber has been removed, but it's not refined where we've changed the actual composition of it. Whereas some of these, like let's say a meat analog that you're talking about, they'll advertise it as being tofu-based, but you would never even recognize a soybean in the thing anymore, right? Because it's been so refined. Or the fact there's a lot of chemical and sodium and fat in there, so we do have to watch that. And there are some meat analogs that are very healthy and very good, that are, very pure. So reading your ingredients, makes a difference.
but like vegan cheese or whatever, that cheese substitute, is that?
Right, again, there's some good and bad ones. We'll talk more about on the counter night about some of those type of ingredients as well. But yes, there are some, like the Daiya cheese is your better option compared to the Okanagan. I don't know if you get Okanagan cheese out here. The Okanagan soy cheese is, you better off eat regular cheese than that one. So, they're all, you just have to read your labels for sure. Okay, let's just quickly go through our recipe. Everyone has a recipe handout, so we've just chosen you a couple of recipes to have some fun and try at home. And the first one there is a lemon poppy seed bread. Now, lemon poppy seed bread, this is a heavier bread. It's very, what shall I say? It is a dense bread, but it is satisfying and very, tastes good. And it's good for you. It's just something different. It's not your light and fluffy bread to make sandwiches with. It's something you would have on the side with your bowl of soup, right? I don't know if you have any questions specifically with that one. It has your flax seeds, grind your flax seeds, and you'll put it in with some water and you'll blend it. And that's an easier way to blend down those flax seeds. If you have them already ground, then just add it to the water and the milk, your whole wheat flour or whatever flour you want, the raisins, lemon juice. everything there is pretty straightforward. Sesame tahini is sesame seed butter. And then it has the stevia powder in it. Or you can use whatever sugar you're comfortable with, coconut sugar or the organic cane sugar or whatever. The chickpea burgers patties, this has become a little bit of a favorite when I teach them at the classes. So these can be used in place like to make like a veggie burger. Put it on a bun with your lettuce and your tomato and so forth. It can also be just warmed up on your plate. Serve it with or without a gravy or salsa or whatever you like. But again, it's very quick and simple to do. If you need to make things gluten-free, you can certainly do that. For the flour, you can use chickpea flour or whatever flour you like there. It's, in honesty, it's only 2 tablespoons in there. If you were to use an unbleached white flour, it wouldn't be the end of the world because you got a lot of fiber from the chickpeas, and so that's okay too. And then some oats and yeah.
The Bragg's and that, is that the liquid?
So yes, the Bragg's is the liquid. It's called all-purpose seasoning because they changed the name. It used to be called Bragg's Liquid Aminos. So it's your soy sauce. So if you're using regular soy sauce, you'll want to use half the amount of that. Well, actually, taste-wise, it should be the same. It's just you're going to end up with double sodium by using regular soy sauce. So Bragg's all-purpose seasoning is found in your health food section of your grocery stores. And it's just made with distilled water and organic soybeans. So there's no coloring, no fermentation, so it's half the sodium of soy sauce. And if you don't have that, you can leave it out too. Yeah. Any other questions on the recipes?
Can we use tomato sauce instead?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now I should just mention the products that we have at the back. Do you remember the last time I was here, I kept talking about seasonings? So we have some seasonings there. We don't have tons, so it is kind of limited of what we have, but they are available for you to purchase if you would like. Cookbooks, again, I am limited to just a few left there, but if you're wanting things like this, once we run out or whatever, just talk to us about that and we can maybe arrange it, but it is there if you are interested in that. So the seasonings, just to kind of talk on that if you weren't here last time, there will be a recipe that will include a chicken-like seasoning on the last night. But basically those you would use in place of your oxo cubes, any type of bouillon powder idea. This is a vegetarian plant-based one. So it's got no cholesterol, no saturated fat idea in it. The sodium is 75% less. At least 75% less than any other brands, whether vegetarian or non-vegetarian out there. And then it's got the natural coloring. Turmeric is in my chicken-like seasoning. Carrot powder is used for the beef-like seasoning. My newest ones are tomato and mushroom. And they make a great soup. On the recipe, on the label, it'll tell you how to make it for regular soup, or if you want to do a condensed soup. So if there's a recipe that calls for a can of mushroom soup, you can make the condensed plant-based mushroom soup there, dairy-free and whatever else, and use it in your recipes. Or it makes a nice gravy. And so any of them can be used in that way, a soup stock, gravy, or sprinkling on rice if you're going to make fried rice or anything of that sort. So that's what those are about.